Remington podcast, where we talk about all things ammunition. I'm your host, Audrey Mays, and today I'm joined here with Jimmy Lawrence, Ballistics Engineer.
Howdy.
And Colt Lloyd, Research and Development Shotshell Engineer.
Glad to be here.
Sweet. In previous episodes, we've touched a little bit on shotshell ballistics and why you should choose a certain turkey ammo, but today we're going to focus specifically on shot science. So, Jimmy, you said that when making a shotshell, it's really important to focus on individual pellets.
Well, if we're going to talk about what makes a attribute of any one of the cartridges in our shotshell catalog unique and why you would buy this instead of that, it all comes down to what you want that one pellet to do in the air and then when it gets to its target, right? Mm-hmm. So you ever lose a clay and find a little chip out of it?
Usually I didn't hit the clay, but I mean, people that are better than me, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever shot a squirrel with a 410 or something, just found like one lucky pellet did the job.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mostly rabbits, but sure.
Yeah. When you sent some of these talking points out and I thought about it, I think the easiest way to tell this story is to talk about what our design requirements are and how that affects that individual pellet. And then you add it with its 300 buddies, and then they can go out and do the job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as Ronnie Evans, the product manager of Shotshell, pointed out in a previous episode, a single pellet has ballistics information that you need to pay attention to.
Yep. So we talk about ballistic coefficient on the rifle side of things. A lot of y'all probably plinked with BB guns in your youth, and on a sunny day, you could actually see that steel BB making its arc. All the same stuff is there. And when you put them all together, some funny things happen, drafting and whatnot. But if you zero into what makes that one pellet fly correctly, I think that's where we get a lot of the decisions we make on wad selection, shot hardness, plated or not plated. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of cool. If you have one example of ammo and you try to figure out why it's that way, that's where I try to zoom out and figure out, well, what does that do for the one pellet?
Right. So let's focus on hardness for a second. Why? And I assume when we're talking about hardness, we're talking about lead shot.
Lead or steel, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why would you need a hard shot, a hard pellet?
So the one pellet wants to be spherical. A lot of people have always asked, why don't you dimple shot? So there would be a time where you want your pattern to dissipate faster and spread out sooner. But in most cases regarding shooting targets, you want it to stay tight. So the only way for all of those pellets to stay tight is if they're all flying as straight as possible. So you want it to not spin and you want it to not have an irregular surface. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Did you play baseball?
I did not.
Okay. You ever see a knuckleball fly versus a curveball? That's what if you have a bunch of curveballs all spinning the wrong way, you actually fan out really quick.
You create holes in the pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you got a bunch of knuckleballs, then they're all just going to be going on kind of the straight line. So when we pull the trigger and all those pellets get squeezed together in the bore, they press against each other, make a bunch of flat spots, and it'll come out looking like a golf ball in the wrong hardness of lead. So if we add different things to make our shot harder, then we'll reduce the amount of deformation we have there. Mm-hmm. So we use antimony.
Well, and to kind of go with your analogy, if you ever, never played baseball, but I watched a fair amount of baseball. In the major leagues, they've got years where the home runs will be really, really up, and the pitchers will be complaining, well, the seams on the baseballs this year are kind of low, so they're not able to create the movement that they want out of their pitch, and they're flying a lot more straight. So
flying slicker.
Yeah. So kind of the same. We're wanting basically the opposite of what the
or maybe they use the wrong
pitcher.
mud.
And you said that we use antimony to make shot harder most of the time.
For lead, yeah.
For lead. What is the difference between shot hardness and shot density?
It's hard to get one without the other, and the only option we have to turn there is the material selection. So you've been working with some of the tungsten and bismuth stuff here more recently, right?
Yeah, I worked with it a little bit, yeah.
And you handle that, you can just feel the density difference. One of the big marketing examples that we use to try to explain why go with tungsten, a number 9 pellet, which is just barely bigger than the head of a pin, has the same weight or the mass as a number 5 pellet, which is almost like like a match head somewhere in there. A little smaller than that.
Yeah, a little smaller. Because I'd say like a 2. I feel like is like probably a true match head.
Yeah. So call it half the size of the pellet with the same amount of mass. Mm-hmm. So that's all in density. Now, because of that, it's going to be hard as snot because it's tungsten, but it now has less than half probably of the cross-sectional area, which is what matters for ballistic coefficient on a sphere.
Okay.
So it pokes through the air a whole lot better, and then all of a sudden when it gets there, it pokes through the tissue, and that's all in the density. But you can't really change one without the other. Mm-hmm. So
it kind of goes also to what you're doing. Like if you are turkey hunting, then you can probably maybe do the TSS because you may shoot twice during the year if you'll pattern your gun before you go, and then you get your one turkey or wherever you're hunting. Mm-hmm. But if you're trap shooting, you obviously can't afford to do that. So like that also kind of plays into what material you use as far as like it's got to be cost competitive depending on what you're doing and then what your end game is, like the volume that you're going to shoot.
Well, we're here for science, not budgets.
It goes together though.
No, and
that's why.
So the obvious next step on that is within lead. So you've worked both with 2% fairly soft shot and then 6% our hardest premium shot just within say 7.5 target loads. How many extra pellets are you getting from the high antimony stuff?
Depending on your payload, I think you're getting around like probably 30-ish extra pellets, say in like an ounce and an eighth.
Right.
But then with that, you're also, not only are you getting more pellets in your pattern, but you also tend to get a higher degree of those pellets to stay in a certain range.
So 2 birds with 1 stone, as it were. When you add the antimony to actually increase the hardness, you reduce the density of that pellet. Mm-hmm. So no, it won't fly as far down range, but it's going to be more spherical. And then it's lower density, so you all of a sudden, for the same ounce and an eighth, have an extra count of those pellets inside your shell.
Because they're smaller, so you can fit more.
Same size.
Same size.
Lower density.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your payload on your shell, it's taking more of that 6% shot to fill up that payload than it is on the 2%.
And a lot of people don't even think about that portion of it, but I've personally seen a little whoopsie where someone accidentally used 2% on a load that was running 6%, and the extra amount of density just from that 4% shift drove the pressure up, or we had to stop and make an adjustment. So it is pretty cool how those material selections actually can affect several things at once.
Mm-hmm. And then, so we were talking about turkey loads in the previous episode. What does plating a pellet change? Does it affect the...
Ronnie said lubricity, and I think I have to agree with him. Mm-hmm. I would hate to prove him wrong.
And it depends on what you're plating.
Right.
Yeah.
There's different, like for steel shot, you're also getting, you add that zinc plating, you're getting a corrosion factor too.
Yeah.
Because, you are using this in environments that are typically wet.
Harsh.
Right. There's so many different things that you shot for. There's target shooting, there's turkey shooting, there's duck hunting. Like there's so many different applications for this stuff. So covering this wide variety is going to be a lot.
We'll try to stay focused.
Yeah.
But I think we found another one of those instances where you got a couple different uses out of the same input. So, yeah, steel shot will get humid and rust. Rusty shot will kill a bird. Mm-hmm. I promise. The problem is rusty shot is rough on the surface, and it can clump together. And it may come out of your muzzle with a couple sticking together. It won't flow very well. So the shot is going to hit your choke harder. It may not flow out of that choke anywhere near as evenly. From that, it imparts spin, which is the death of your pattern. Mm-hmm. So on steel shot, yeah, it keeps it shiny and pretty, but not a lot of guys are cutting open their shells to look at how shiny and pretty the payload is.
It's true.
However, because we've kept it from rust, and it does move together a little bit more easily. So same thing as what Ronnie was referring to is the plated lead shot. I think we see that same benefit with the surface-to-surface friction of lead on lead. It's like real gooey when you get to these pressure levels, and it just kind of locks together and makes one plug. Mm-hmm. If you plate it, it lets it kind of slide. Mm-hmm. So on an extra full turkey choke, you're taking your full bore, and you're having to nozzle it down to a longer, thinner shot string, I believe that plating goes a long way to help that squish process without damaging the shot and also without imparting much spin.
So it affects the way that the pellets move down the barrel after you pull the trigger, essentially.
Yeah, against each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes your pattern smoother. Like the flow is better, right? So does it affect your pattern in a positive way?
I don't know if I've ever really shot patterns on plated versus unplated.
I've never done it.
We compare it to spec, but have you recently done some 2% versus 6% or pure versus 6% patterns just for?
I've done all
of those.
we had a EX run that we did where we had a miscommunication. We thought we were having them load the 6%. Accidentally, it got loaded with 2%, and I was counting my patterns after, and I was like, "What the heck? These aren't what really I was expecting. What I thought they were." And we took the samples up to the chem lab and had them test them. They came in as 2%. When we hand loaded the 6%, I mean, it jumped our pattern up by 12%. So I mean,
which is good. And by the way, when we measure pattern, what he's talking about 12%. Every gauge, of course, in SAMI has what you should look at in terms of range. But basically, for 12 gauge, we'll just stick there. 40 yards, full choke barrel. What percentage of your pellets land inside a 30-inch circle? So your average shot shell, broken bird, or dead turkey, call it 40 yards. We'll shoot at one spot and then put a 30-inch circle around that. Count the total number of holes and see what percentage of those are within that. So a good pattern's 65%.
It depends on what you're using it for. For trap, I think typically the requirement's 70
in SAMI. Yeah,
in SAMI. I'd say, I mean, if you get up around 70, it's a pretty good pattern. You get up to start 75, 80, you're talking great pattern.
And I'll tell you, it's been some years since I sat down and did just tons of that. Colt's done more recently than I have. There are advanced and very sophisticated ways to count these patterns, but what we do is lay out on a table with either a pitch counter or your brain and just count holes. If you 0 to 300 over and over again.
It's why if you ever stop in the R&D conference room, it's not the original color it was because it's got red, green, and black Sharpie all over it.
Yeah, you just see the Sharpie dots all over the table.
Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
The slow way.
Yeah.
And if you see people counting, don't try to talk to them while they're counting, please.
And that's part of shot science. I mean, there's no better way to count patterns than just shoot paper and go look at them. The cool thing is that's something people can do at the house. Shot shell velocity.
It's probably recommended actually before you go out in the field and hunt. I mean, because there are interactions. Some guns don't like certain loads. Chokes are different. I mean, you don't have. I don't know the amount of aftermarket chokes that are out there, but I mean, you can pretty much choose anything.
Well, and every manufacturer's got a different definition of what a modified is.
Well, and that all goes back to their starting bore diameter varies a little bit.
So it's based off of constrictions and all of those things. But when you get to the end of the tube and you hammer that shot, every gun's going to do it differently. That's barrel length, the final constriction. And that's not even talking about, like you mentioned, the aftermarket chokes. So sporting chokes that are extended or ported turkey chokes, all kinds of goofy stuff can happen out there on those. So, yeah, just the same as I'll always tell people, if you buy a box of our rifle ammunition, you want to go hunting, go zero your rifle at the range you want to kill an animal at. Same thing with a shotgun. Go shoot a pie plate and see if it's dead.
I mean, it'll tell you if your gun likes that. It'll tell you if your gun shoots high left. I mean, it's something that it's good to know before you get out in the field. I mean, it probably not as big of an issue if you're shooting doves where you're shooting a case. But if you're shooting a turkey and you don't know your gun shoots high left or it's a bad pattern, you don't have a ton of opportunities on those.
Yeah, and it's also important, again, to know if there are holes in your pattern. And if your shotgun is consistently producing holes in your pattern, you need to figure out why.
Yeah, I think Logan had talked about that with John just briefly a couple episodes back, having his barrel massaged towards a certain type of ammo. And that was interesting to me because you hear about that all the time in rifle, tuning your cartridge load velocity to your barrel's harmonics. It's going to be the same way on a shotgun's profile through the whole wave of that pressure down the gun. So really neat stuff that you kind of have to do on your own in the backyard a little bit.
Yeah.
So
you need to figure out, again, like we were talking about the importance before, how the shot interacts with each other within your gun barrel, because it affects what happens downrange. Internal ballistics affects external ballistics.
and terminal. Yep.
Yeah, and terminal ballistics. So
Yeah, we break them up into 3 separate conversations, but we can only do one thing to change all of that together. And, speaking of hardness, that reminded me of one. I think it was you, Colt, that I called up to question the other day last summer. We were running a project. Brooke, hi, if you're out there listening. I think it was Nitro Pigeon.
Yeah.
And I saw the load letter called for 2% or even pure drop shot.
2%.
And I was confused, and I was dead certain y'all had gotten that wrong, because this is supposed to be like a really high-end competitive ammo. But then someone had made the comment that, well, the pellet is going to mush better if it's softer. And I thought, no, that's a bunch of hooey. A pellet of birdshot doesn't mush. But y'all tested that, right?
Yeah, we shot into gel blocks. I don't know if you took pictures of that
I
one.
was not there for Nitro Pigeon.
Sorry about that. But yeah, we tested them both.
And that was kind of
actually-
an eye-opener to me.
That had been a request of that product when we brought it back, was to go to the 2%, because specifically in the arenas that use that product, they have to basically have their bird land in a certain area. So whether
Yeah,
or not
break the crap out of it as you would.
whether or not they both may kill them, but one may not kill them
Fast enough.
fast enough.
Yeah. So 2%, that's relatively soft.
It's about 2% harder than pure.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No,
I don't know if you.
so the only way I've ever been able to really kind of sit down and try to get an idea, you can go grab the wire in the lead area and bend it.
Okay. With your hands.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can take rifle wire.
Gloves, but
Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, yes. Don't lick it, all those things. You can go to the rifle extrude area where they're doing like 1.5% next to pure, and you can start to feel a little bit of difference. So we'll never see 6% wire to my awareness, because that's only going to be in drop shot. But you can, again, take a hammer and hit a 6% pellet versus a pure lead pellet and see the difference in mush just spreading out on the table. So it does really affect it. And lead doesn't work harden as much as other materials, so you don't have many options as to how to change that hardness. So all we can do is alloy it, which add another material. So
what's your thoughts on obviously like our top of the line target loads use 6% antimony. You've started to see a couple of like 8%, I think, pop up. You think that's kind of a gimmick? I mean, it's one of those, at some point there's going to be a point of diminishing returns because you're sacrificing density.
yeah, we load a steel shot that would basically tick all those boxes, right? We have Sportsman Steel 7 shot. You can go shoot that on a trap range if you want to. But personally, I know that when you shoot steel shot, it's like throwing styrofoam beads at something. It just loses its energy so quickly. So yeah, you start breaking over that point where you're sacrificing downrange energy for hardness and pellet count. Now, on a skeet field, again, back to philosophy of use. Skeet birds are not far away. They're moving fast. You want an open pattern. Skeet choke's just barely tighter than IC, right? Anyhow, maybe looser. One or the other.
Looser.
Call it a short barrel with no choke. And maybe you want that stuff to wiffle ball out real quick. So I could see a less dense payload being more advantageous there. But if you get into sporting clays where you've all of a sudden got like 70-yard birds on occasion, way the heck out there, I don't think I would want more than 6%. And that's, again, that's all beliefs and intangibles we could go test.
Yeah. Well, and you, I mean, I'm not going to be the budget guy, but you do drive cost up the more antimony you add.
It is.
You seem like the budget guy.
No,
Which is funny because I'm not really great with budgets.
so as well as the rest of us, we have a good, better, best here in all of our product lines. We try to keep that isolated and explained cleanly. So you go up to the shelf, here's Gun Club, here's American Clay and Field. We may not have that one around anymore. Okay. And then up here is STS and Nitro. So we have to find the different things to keep those costs all in line with the performance expectation. So the 6% is more expensive shot. And that is why it is not in Gun Club. And so and in Heavy Dove, I think I figured that out when we had that discussion about terminal performance. You may want the lead to actually mush a little bit, like we do with buckshot. We actually shoot jello with buckshot on occasion and look for pellet expansion. So,
I mean, it makes sense. Buckshot, you're shooting like a huge, thick-skinned animal
yeah.
versus a bird, right?
Yeah, and that's anything from 3 and 4 pellets and a 410 all the way up to 27 pellets of 4-buck.
4-buck, yeah.
And I think our big old 3.5-inch double aught is an 18 pellet payload of double aught buck, if I remember correctly.
I know I'm pretty sure 3 inches 9. So
Yeah. We have a 14 and a 15 pellet option in there too. But you start thinking about, at that point in time, we're all having the same conversation here of one pellet going downrange to do one thing. If I take a 32 auto pistol and go shoot a wild boar 8 times, he's probably going to notice it.
Right.
Now, if I shoot him 8 times all at once with the same bullet, go ahead and consider it and add some more velocity, because you're going to pick up, a couple 100 feet from the one cartridge to the other, obviously. And you spread that over just like a 1-foot circle on his brisket plate. Now, all of a sudden, you're into some devastation. But all of those pellets have to get there and hit pretty close to the same spot. So it goes back to those same conversations we already had.
Yeah. Another thing that I find interesting about shot science is that shot patterning isn't necessarily 2-dimensional. It's more 3-dimensional because it's a shot string, right? And there can be holes in your shot string.
Yep.
And that 3-dimensional aspect is one that probably has a lot more debate, because it also requires a lot more. It's a lot harder to test.
It's
Right.
intangible is the word I like to use. So you can take high-speed footage, and you have to start zooming out your frame to capture the entire thing. It grows. Very tail end is running slower than the front end usually.
Right.
So that brings up a story that I've always really enjoyed, and I'm sure it's true.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, one of his previous generations of R&D engineers there in the trailer, Vince Scarlatta, had told this story, and I think he was there for it, right? When you wanted to measure the shot string length, how in the world would you do that? So they went and got a box truck and drove it down Highway 15 at a set speed
Okay.
and shot it with a shotgun. And then
So
measured,
it would hit ding, 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 ding as it moved?
exactly, and then measured the length of the pattern on the paper board they put on the back of the truck.
That's
like-
super interesting.
But I think it would work. So
Did they ever do it? Or was that
from,
just...
From what I understand, it did happen.
I don't see why I wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's
really interesting. And, I mean, Logan, when we talked about... I think it was the Shooting Under the Lights episode. Logan talked about having holes in your shot string. He was talking about shooting trap and like how it's a possibility that you could have holes in your shot string. And I commented, enough to fit a clay target in. I don't think that's gonna happen. But
Well, keep in mind, your clay target has to fly across traffic.
Right.
It's like Frogger.
that would be pretty interesting if you're a clay target
40
size
miles
hole.
an hour versus 1,200 feet a second. I'll believe Logan.
You believe Logan?
Yeah, sure.
Well, in sporting clays, a lot of people will argue that you want to use a tighter choke for like the ones that are farther out there, because you spread out your shot string. So like, I'm not exactly sure where the lead on that one is, but if I'm swinging through and it's at 60 yards, well, if I got a tighter choke I couldn't quantify how much longer your shot string would be.
I think that would be the big benefit, because your lead at that point in time, we're out there guessing sometimes on a sporting clays course between 1 pizza box and 3 pizza boxes. And if you have a 6 to 8 foot long shot string instead of, just in real tight, like a single pellet, then you slap across that thing with a wider apparent pattern.
Yep.
And I think that's what Logan's talking about here. Not that a bird will fit through a stop-start gap in the thing, but the hole at this direction through the pattern matters just as much to one straight through. So when we shoot paper, all we see is what you mentioned earlier, that 2-dimension stack of the entire shot string. But the word intangible is what I'm going to continue to use, because I don't know how in the word you 3D model that and then much less make it better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I know Logan sent me a video. There was a guy that did a bunch of shot string measurements using some of the high speed cameras, and looking at how different wads that were designed to travel farther with the shot versus wads that were designed to basically as soon as they come out of the barrel to strip. And it was an interesting video, but it was also one of those, it was like, well, this is cool, but it's like,
I know it exists. Now what?
now what do we do?
Yeah.
Let's go shoot a truck.
And so would density or hardness or plating anything affect your shot string, or is it really just the choke you choose?
I think I know what Colt's going to say.
Well, I mean, your higher antimony gets you more pellets in there to spread out.
What about duplex payloads?
Yeah.
Oh,
That
I
was
mean,
my next question.
I mean, we saw it. It does seem like on that one, it seems like our patterns went up, and whether or not it's because you've got your heavier shot in the front, kind of, and you're letting it draft, and you're adding more pellets in your mixture. It gives you I'm good at this distance and at this distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which, have you ever read any of those? They're not necessarily. There's been a couple of articles that are on the server that are like, it's like defining what shot size you needed to use based on like they're like articles on like, which they were very intangible, but like on killing force and like what ethically harvesting birds at certain distances.
You're talking about in the AB reports?
I think so.
So that's a conversation that is about along the same tone as felt recoil and what to do about it. 'Cause I do remember finding some of those things, and it is basically we're going to get the hugest sample size we can. We're going to find 1,000 hunters. We're going to just basically ask them a bunch of questions and then follow them for a couple of years and then have a status report. And it was the same thing. Those engineers from 50 years ago tried to figure out how to capture data out of something that is so subjective. Because whether you like it or not, killing force is subjective. One pellet through a vital area of any living creature does the job.
Yeah.
So we had that conversation again. It crept up back when we got into looking at TSS, those years ago when it was just started into the market. We had tried to figure out how in the heck do you show something is more lethal, and how do you know if a bird likes mush and soft or tiny and velocity, lead versus tungsten.
Right.
Well, we can shoot jello and show it. We've shot steel signs with pictures of ducks on them to show what momentum does. That's also important. And
well, going back to that, I know we shot, you look at on some of those steel signs you shoot, like, maybe you shoot them with steel and they're dimpled, and you shoot them with TSS and there's just holes in them, and they're the same.
it turns it into a pasta sieve.
Yeah. Anyway, I know on duplex we went and shot gel on it, and you could see, like, say on the 2x6, the 6 would be, I can't remember the numbers because I've slept since then, but
It would be further into the gel.
yeah, the 6 is this far in and the 2s are even farther. So,
Yeah.
and it's one of those, gel's a good way to do it.
I'm always leaning back towards Ricky's idea at that point in time, which we have a pretty heavy resident goose population here at this facility. And we were thinking, man, if we could get a depredation permit or a conservation hunt, whatever you'd want to call it, and just lay out some yardsticks and sit down for a while, just really put some science on it.
And they're banded too, so
A lot of them are double banded. They've been sitting here for 8 years, not going anywhere.
Oh,
think
they
that was-
never leave.
Canada geese, don't
Yeah.
worry. There's nothing special about them.
You're really making my job here hard. Going back to knockdown power, there is certain things you can do to retain the energy.
So
right?
I'm shaking my head over here because it's one of those things it's hard to put into words. The idea of killing force, knockdown power, whatever it is, what there is are energy, momentum, and energy transfer. So when a moving projectile hits something, does it poke straight through and leave minimal tissue damage? Think of an acupuncture needle.
Right.
You're not even going to feel it. A knitting needle. Or does it dissipate a whole bunch of energy in a really short amount of distance and just turn everything around that into jello? And you have to figure out how to quantify that terminal performance more than just how fast did you hit it. So the number one thing is energy, because that's the velocity and you take a small pellet and you take it up to, 9/10 of the light of speed, it's going to turn it into atoms. But somewhere in the middle there, you have to realize there is no spec for quote unquote knockdown power, because that is how the energy manifests itself when it gets to that tissue that it hits.
Right.
And I don't know, I think Federal made that split shot stuff. I thought that was pretty neat. Have you ever messed around with that?
I haven't ever shot gel with it, but it seems, I mean, that's the one that like it's like the buckshot that's kind of got like the
Looks like you open your tackle box.
It's got like the stress risers cut into it. It looks like
And you got
like
a sinker weight.
yeah. Which I mean, and that's the one where it's like supposedly when it hits,
It doubles up.
One pellet becomes two, and now you got
Two hemispheres. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're tumbling.
Well,
I mean,
they don't have to fly in air
and
anymore.
you can. I mean, and I've never shot gel with Black Cloud, but like they've got their round pellets in there, and then they've got the ones that almost have like that little like
Ring on them.
they look like a planet almost.
the Saturn shaped ones. Yeah.
And like I've never shot gel with them, but I know
I've heard stories.
I've heard people like,
the
well,
wound cavities.
I shot this banded duck, but it got hit with one of those, and there's nothing left to get mounted.
Interesting.
So
I've done that with hypersonic.
Yes.
That's velocity.
That's pure velocity.
And there's nothing that touches it. I mean, you got
speed kills.
a good lethal, high quality waterfowl loads 1,600 feet a second. And hypersonic starts at like 1750. A lot of times I'm shooting hypersonic BBs. I shot a floater just right outside of our blind one time. It was one of those dumb things where I think, why'd I do that? But yeah, it was a donut with feathers. It was just.
Are you shooting a goose?
This one was a duck.
A duck.
A duck doesn't have as much to lose as a goose does.
Right. Right. That's why I was like, wow, they did that to a goose. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I've seen perforated geese as well, but they have something edible left. So
Yeah, if you hit a teal with one of those,
It's so small.
yeah, I mean it uses up one of your 6 ducks you can get, but it's like there's no meat out of it.
yeah,
If you're trying to buy the correct shot shell to retain as much energy as it can, as far as you can go, what's more important? Density, hardness? Should it be coated? What's the deal?
density is the key.
Density is key.
That's all there is in my opinion.
And it goes back to what he was saying about the with the density, you're able to go to a smaller shot size, and then there's less surface area for the drag to impact upon.
It's all about drag. So regardless of the size,
Okay.
even if you go up to a tungsten BB pellet, now you weigh all that extra amount and you have more moving mass to pull that energy away from. So your drag function on a sphere is, like I said, super simple. We're not talking about sleek bullet designs with secant ogives or tangent ogives and boat tails and all those things. We can make that fly further and further. You got a sphere. The only thing you can alter is density. Now, the size matters for other reasons, how many pellets you get and all that stuff. But if you just focus in on getting the difference between a softball and a baseball that both weigh 5 ounces, assuming I think they do either way, and throwing one of those at somebody, which one do you want to get hit in the face by?
Do I want to get in the face by? Probably none of
No,
them.
you're picking one.
Oh, okay. Probably the softball.
And that's all about density. So it'll fly further. You can hit them further. Home runs on longer fields. All of those things, and it all comes down to density.
Okay.
So
That's important to know. So that would be why TSS is like the bad daddy when it comes to shooting turkeys.
yeah, I mean, if we were allowed to hunt waterfowl with lead shot, you would see everybody doing that, and for good reasons. We, as a nation, stopped doing that a long time ago. So there are regulatory and environmental concerns that make you have to use non-toxic. If you're in an area where that is not as much of a concern, lead is good. What holds you from shooting tungsten at everything? Like he mentioned, price point.
Monies. Yeah.
Yep.
That's got to be it, right?
I mean, I'd shoot silver rifle bullets if I could afford it, right? It'd be
Would
better-
you
It'd be better than
hunting
copper.
werewolves?
You don't have to. It's a good density. It'd be tougher than lead, obviously. It would be akin to a copper solid, but you'd have the cross-sectional density more like a pure lead bullet. And even better than that would be gold. But again, we're getting silly because if you're only looking at what does the job best, you're going to wind up with tungsten. Well, why not core lock gold?
Money.
Price point.
Yeah. It's all about the money.
Easy answer.
Yeah.
But like to go back to give you like in steel or in waterfowl hunting, I've always heard that like say if you're shooting 2 steel, well, if you want to spend a little bit more money and go a little bit denser, you can shoot 4 bismuth, and they're going to be about the same performance. And if you want to go a little bit farther and you want to shoot tungsten, it's going to be about like you could shoot like a 6 tungsten, and it's going to give you about the same as like a 2 steel. Which goes back to it's going to fly. It's denser and it's going to fly farther because you're getting down to a smaller shot size. So,
yeah, all those things that you have to think about as you switch back and forth between these products is what are you changing and what do you have to adjust for. This last waterfowl season, a good example, I wound up with some of our Wingmaster, which is the tungsten bronze matrix.
Some good stuff.
Is that 18?
Wingmaster's 12.
12 G per cc. Okay.
TSS is the 18.
And what is the bismuth? It's at 9.5.
Bismuth's like bismuth's like 9.5, 9.8.
Okay. So it's all way better than steel.
Which is like 7 and change.
So I had a bunch of hypersonic steel as backup. I bought some cases of Premier bismuth, and then I wound up with some Wingmaster. And shooting those 3 different velocities, payloads, and densities, I realized I had almost a placebo effect that the hypersonic was better and more lethal than all these other exotics because I was hitting the birds and I forgot I had to lead more because of that extra velocity.
Because they're moving faster.
Yeah. So I went to a 3-inch shell that was a more plain Jane, ounce and 3/8 payload, but it was carrying that energy way downrange a lot more reliably, but it came out of the gates at a lower velocity. When it got there, of course, it's going to hit better, but you got to lead it like a clay. And it took me about an hour of hunting before I realized I was shooting them in the butt instead of the face. And once I remembered that, then I got kind of back on target. So you always have to keep in mind what you're changing and pay attention to that. And when you change almost any one of those things we've been discussing.
Yeah. And it does make a difference is the important thing that people understand.
Yeah, we don't have like 6, 8, 10 pages thick of our catalog with nothing but shotgun shells for no reason.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, Logan shoots 12.35 ounce and an eighths when he's shooting, I think, from the handicap event and trap. And that's because, I mean, could you probably get away with shooting 11.45s? Yeah. But, I mean, you're going to have a little bit more lead. And then also, like a trap shooter loves to, like, shoot and get like that. Basically, the clay just disappears. They don't want to chip.
Yeah.
And that goes
positive
back.
reinforcement.
Yeah, I mean.
And handicap, I mean, you're 27 yards back. Like,
Sometimes.
the big boys.
I shoot 20 yards.
And so it's important to, get them to reach out there. So you need that velocity so it feels like you're still on the 16.
Yeah, well, especially in the game of trap, the bird's running away from you every time. So you got to chase it down. And, lead's not as exotic, but you still got to get out there before it arcs over and hits the dirt.
And that's why when you see all these, really, maybe not even really competitive trap shooters, but they shoot different shot shells for each different event.
I know a guy like that.
They perform differently.
Carson
Yeah.
shoots doubles with a light and then a standard. He goes 2 3/4 dram and a 3 dram.
Yeah, one in the top barrel, one in the bottom barrel.
You start on the bottom, I think he does, because that's straight into you. And then on the top barrel, you send your heavier
up.
one. And so when we go out and test ammo, a lot of the times we'll go shoot trap doubles, testing target ammo. So whether we're looking for variation of one sort or another, especially when target season is coming around, we want to shoot 5 guys in a row in a good cadence of trap doubles. So it's bang, 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 bang. That way, if any chance of a bang puff, everyone hears it. It's very repeatable. Well, Carson's out there to have fun when he shoots doubles.
Yeah.
And so he'll shoot light, heavy. And it's like, dude, no, quit doing that.
You're messing
We're
everyone
shooting
up.
all of the nitros right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as people competing doing that, they do it from a recoil standpoint.
Yeah, you don't have your gun
in
come
doubles,
off target.
in doubles, I mean, a lot of those, I didn't grow up a trap shooter, not really great at shooting trap, but a lot of them, I mean, that first target, I mean, they've got a hold point, and they're almost like pull the trigger.
Yep.
So it's one of those. It's not out there yet. So why do you need that extra, say, 100 feet? When it's right there.
Well,
and it's like if you had a lot more velocity, then you're gonna have more recoil, then it's gonna be harder to get on the second bird.
Exactly. It's another one of those dual use decisions where you have less gun upset and you don't need all the extra horsepower. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen people make that same decision duck hunting. You know, they have two different Shotshell products right next to them, and depending on how far away the birds are for that day, they're going to grab out of this box versus that one.
I load my gun with the longest range thing I can in the end of the magazine. So my first shot is going to be when I have all these things at my fingertips.
Right.
I'm going to put a 3-inch in the chamber with bismuth, and at the bottom of the tube is going to be that 3.5-inch Wingmaster. So as they've turned around and they're leaving, I can still maybe try it. So
Yeah, I do it some with like put a BB in the farthest back one in the tube.
Yeah.
And then shoot twos.
yeah,
My other
exactly.
two shot.
Right.
And it also depends on the distances the birds are working. If you get a few more geese that day, it'd be like, okay, I'll take that box of BBs out and shoot purely that.
Well, especially with ducks, you get a lot more options for in close, fast shots. It might be a woody just screaming through or whichever, but by the time you get to the third shell, if you have the option, it better be a long shot.
Well, because they're almost always at that point. They've already turned and they're going away.
Yeah.
So all this matters.
Yep.
Pay attention. It'll make your game better, y'all. Oh, gosh. Okay.
And that's why we do the science.
Yeah. And that's why we have shot science. And you too. Well, there you have it, guys. Remington is on the rise. Like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to share this podcast with your hunting or shooting buddies. If you want to reach out to me or either of these gentlemen here, you can email us at podcast@remington.com. Thanks for listening.